What is going on, Pacer Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Pacers, guys, the Indiana Pacers officially will finally figure out here coming up. The Indiana Pacers will figure out where they fall in the draft lottery standings here coming up for the 2026 draft. Coming up here very, very soon, Derek. So we're really excited about that. And so, guys, we wanted to kind of discuss this and discuss a couple scenarios here that the Indiana Pacers could find themselves in, because I think there's a couple things that could happen here, Derek, that we need to be prepared for the Indiana Pacers. I think obviously the first thing you've got to talk about is, the Zubac trade that the Pacers did make, earlier on, about middle of the season, or was that January, February time, when the Pacers made that trade for Zubac. Obviously, we know kind of some of the, things around that trade was a condition for this year's draft. If it fell outside of the top four, if it was in 5 or 6, then that pick would go back to the Clippers and the Pacers would not have that pick. But if the Pacers were to get a pick within the top 4, or I think it was 7 on or something like that, I don't remember the full exact trades, but basically, for the Pacers standpoint, since they had the second worst record in the league, if the Pacers get pick 5 or 6, they lose the pick. If they get a top 4 pick, they keep the pick there. And so that's just something to remember when it comes to this. So obviously, Pacers fans, we're hoping that the Indiana Pacers get a pick within the top 4, because not only do they get Zubac moving forward, but they potentially get a guy that can come in and be a franchise player, right? And so that kind of leads me to that first scenario here, Derek, which would be the Indiana Pacers. They, figure out they get a top 4 pick somewhere, somehow. And depending where it falls, the Pacers either get their choice or get one of 4 guys that will be available there for them in AJ DeBenza, Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, or Caleb Wilson here, Derek. So tell me about your thoughts, man, on this first scenario here that the Indiana Pacers could find themselves in, potentially getting one of the best players in the 2026 draft, in a class that we've heard a lot of people talk about and say this is a generational type of class from a prospect standpoint in the top 4. What are your thoughts on that, in addition to potentially having Zubac for the future of your center position as well moving forward?
4 freshmen in that top 4, that the consensus top 4, that definitely all impact the game in their own way. DeBenza obviously being able to score, 25 a night and shooting 51% from the floor. I mean, absolutely incredible being able to do that. And then, of course, when you're talking about Darren Peterson, who, again, at the beginning of the year was the number 1 consensus before DeBenza came in and started to take back over for that. But Peterson, again, led Kansas to a great season, averaging over 20 points per game as well. And then, of course, Boozer, that everyone loves, from Duke, 6'9", just under the age of 19 years old, and actually said has the highest plus-minus score in the nation from this last year at a 17.1. Just a high-effort player, and that's where he gets the majority of his points from, was averaging a double-double this year. And then, of course, Caleb Wilson, if you're 6'10", and being able to average almost a double-double as well. I mean, you've got 4 very insanely young, high-value players here, Cody. And, I mean, if it were up to me, and you can disagree with me, I honestly don't even really know, but, like, if it were me, I'm hoping that the Pacers could get either the number 1, or if they're not going to get the number 1, then whether they get 3 or 4 doesn't really bother me that much, because I think Boozer and Wilson both are kind of similar in their games. And also the fact that they play the same position. They're both power forward / center hybrids. They're not, insanely tall compared to some other guys out there, but 6'9", 6'10", about the typical size for a power forward. I think that's more of what the Pacers might be looking for than potentially a guard. Now, I mean, obviously, if the Pacers are sitting there and they have, say, pick 3 or 4, and then say Debonsa and maybe a Boozer is gone at pick 1 and 2. Say somehow Darren Peterson keeps falling, then I'm not going to tell the Pacers not to take him just because, if he's 6'6", he can play shooting guard. I mean, most guys that are shooting guards are around that height anyway. I just feel like potentially the Pacers could be looking more for a big man type scorer because, the Pacers, obviously they have Pascal Siakam who clearly can do that for you. But if you could get someone that can play at that small forward position and still be able to get you double-digit scoring more frequently, I think that would be helpful because for me, I just feel like the guards on this team have a little bit better opportunity being able to score. Obviously, Halliburton has his opportunities to score. Nembhard is a baller. He's able to create his own shot. Siakam can create his own shot, clearly. But after that, I don't really think that there are many guys at the forward or center position for the Pacers that can create their own shot. They have to be either they have to be on the fast break or they need to be in some sort of transition game to get a shot created. So I feel like certain players at certain positions here would probably be better for the Pacers if they're trying to repeat back to that 2024, 2025 season. But again, these top 4 guys, no doubt, I mean, any of those players can come in right away and help the Indiana Pacers to get back to where they were if we were to select any of them.
I think one thing the Pacers desperately needed last year that we saw was the defensive side of things. Like, the Pacers were clearly lacking. I don't think it was necessarily always, from what I understood, again, I didn't watch every single game like a lot of people did. I tuned into most of them, but it seemed like from what I understood, the Pacers definitely their struggle was not necessarily offensively, but it was definitely some defensive issues they had. So if you bring in one of those, guys that play really good defense like a Boozer, who can come in and help you out immediately, with your big game. Obviously, we know Zubac is going to be your starting guy at center. You still have a guy like Micah Potter. You have Jay Huff around potentially if you keep him around. So you have a few options there, Obi Toppin as well, but you don't necessarily have a super elite defender. So I think getting somebody like that would certainly help in that capacity. But Debonsa, like we said, I think when you look at the Pacers starting 5 right now, you can pretty confidently say if you go out tomorrow, you would know what that is. But I think the biggest question mark is still, like you said, that small forward position, because we don't know 100% who is going to be, that long-term piece at starting at small forward. I mean, like probably right now it's Nesmith, but Nesmith, I mean, as good as I think he can be, he hasn't, I don't think, proven to me that he's a guy you 100% slate in like you do necessarily with a Nembhard or with the Siakam. He's not been, he kind of has a little bit more inconsistency.
Yeah, he feels more like a shooting guard that just sometimes gets thrown into that 3 spot because of just how good his defense is.
Yeah, he's got electric defense, but I think it's crazy because he's the guy that went in the playoffs, and we remember what he did when he hit 4 or 5 threes in a row.
Oh, yeah, that Knicks series, he was lights out. I mean, even the playoffs in general, he was. It's just it's just not been his identity all throughout his career. I mean, he's obviously shown the willingness to shoot the 3, and he can definitely get those up, but he's more of a spot shooter. He is not a guy like a Tyrese Halliburton or a Andrew Nembhard or even a Pascal Siakam that can get himself open at the 3-point line off his own dribble and be able to do that. Now, obviously, not taking away anything about what Nesmith does. I mean, that the defense he has is probably the best defense on this team and some of the best effort that you will see in the NBA when you talk about defense. But obviously, just struggles sometimes to put the ball in the basket. And if you could get a guy like a Debonsa that, if somebody that can average 20 a game because he's just a go-getter, he's a guy that can get his own bucket. I mean, that's an incredible thing to have, and to have someone that can, and then a Nesmith that could potentially, mix in those minutes with someone like that and be able to, maybe even take some stress off of Nembhard and be able to finally get back at the shooting guard position where he kind of belongs. I feel like that could be really helpful for you.
I just feel like depending, like, I think you can't go wrong, like, with any of these picks. But to me, the way the Pacers roster is currently constructed, it seems like it affords you more of an opportunity there at adding a guard or adding a small forward rather than adding a power forward / center, because I feel like you have more guys in that area that right now make more sense. Because if you draft one of those guys, if you draft Boozer, if you draft Wilson, what does that mean for a guy like Obi Toppin? What does that mean for where the Pacers feel like Pascal Siakam is in his career? But it brings up a lot more questions to me. And this is a Pacers team that we've heard the Pacers GM Chad Buchanan say that we're ready to win now. That's why we made that trade for Zubac when we did. We're ready to go win now. So what does that mean, right? Are you wanting to draft a guy that, he'll really help you out on the bench, or a player that can really get big minutes early, right? And I think DiBenzo or Peterson might get a little bit more just because I don't feel like those positions, the shooting guard / point guard, the guard positions and or the small forward position is as crowded necessarily as the big man in the middle there for the Pacers. I could be wrong, but it just seems like it brings up more questions if you draft one of those guys. And again, you may not have a choice, but if you draft one of those guys over Darren Peterson or AJ DiBenza, and obviously it all depends where the lottery falls for the Pacers, but it does definitely bring up a lot more questions. And do they keep everybody on this roster? That's a pretty crowded group there, or does somebody get shipped off? I mean, there's a lot of questions that come along with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's a certain predicament where, again, an embarrassment of riches is still a great thing to have, but of course, when you're looking at when there's only so many players available and so many minutes to give to all these different players, especially when a bunch of these guys are, they play a lot of minutes and they play very important role minutes for you. You have to be careful about the positions that you're taking. So obviously, the Pacers would like to probably get one position over the other. But, again, if you're not the number one overall pick, you may not have that certain choice the further down you go.
Yeah, right. And I think there's definitely like just a need for the Pacers on their bench to just add some more scorers, like you said, some more shot creators, some guys that you feel like can come in and really help you out from a bench. I mean, Chad Buchanan even said that. He was on with JMV. He talked about that, right? He's like, we need more guys on the bench, coming up. We need more scoring off the bench, probably from the wing position, which does that tell you where the Pacers feel like their need is right there? I think it does potentially there from what he said. So that's definitely just something to consider there, and also, the biggest question, I mean, maybe this is also in favor, saying that, maybe this is also in favor of some of those big guys is, do you feel comfortable with Micah Potter or Jay Huff or Obi Toppin as your backup center, as your backup five? Do you feel comfortable with that? Or do you want to go get another guy that, maybe in first couple of years he doesn't start, but he plays and contributes in a strong way? How do they view that backup five? That's my big question there. And that's what Chad Buchanan also brought up as well. So that's also something to consider. So I think it's just like, I feel like we're talking our heads off, but I feel like there's just so many ways this seriously could go, and it's going to change the way the Pacers roster looks based off of who they draft. It's really, so I'm just curious on how that's going to look. But anyway, scenario one, Pacers take one of those players. Can't go wrong with either of the top four. I mean, I think they're all really good options for Indiana. And obviously, it'd be great to have the number one pick. You can pick whoever you want, but we'll have to see how that does pan out. Obviously, scenario two, the one that everybody would hate, the Pacers don't draft in the top five or the top four. The Pacers get pick 5 or 6. That's a possibility, and they lose their pick, which would definitely suck. But there's a lot of ways the Pacers can continue to build to their roster, so it would suck, but definitely wouldn't be necessarily like devastating. Because the Pacers, I think, still will seriously compete. But losing out on a player like that, one of those four, would definitely suck a lot. But that's the scenario number 2. And then there's scenario number 3, Derek, which is kind of interesting. And it makes me kind of wonder with where the Pacers are right now as a team, do they want to rely upon a rookie, right? Or do they want to trade that pick I know a lot of people wouldn't like that, but do the Pacers want to trade that pick and go and get a proven player to help them out? I mean, that's a possibility as well, right? Because do you want to wait on a rookie? Do you want to wait on getting him up to speed, or do you want to just have a guy that can hit the ground running from day one? When you feel like your championship window is now, are you willing to, let a rookie kind of ease into it a little bit? Or do you want immediate impact? I think that's a big question.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does matter about how the Pacer staff feels about certain amount of these guys. I mean, when you're talking about players like Pascal Siakam, who, are 32 years old now. I mean, Siakam still feels like he's still in his prime of what he's trying to do right now. But again, when you get to that age of 34, 35, 36, you start being like, I don't know how much longer these guys actually have it. So, I mean, Siakam, as great as he has been for us, I mean, obviously doesn't feel like he's going to be around forever. Now, I mean, the good chunk of the rest of the roster is still below the age of 30 years old or right at around 30. So, overall, not too bad when it comes to the age of some of these players, which is a good thing. So, I mean, if you wanted to go that route of getting a rookie, then obviously it doesn't impact you too much as far as like the trajectory of the team, because it's different, Cody, when we talk about the Colts, right? Where the Colts have these mixture of a bunch of veterans on this team that are, right in the prime or nearing the end of their prime. And then the Colts have these plethora of like insanely young players that are starting to do something, but like there's no mixture. There's nobody in the middle that's like leveling this stuff out. So it's hard to kind of look that direction. And, and you're right also, if you feel that you get like the third or fourth pick and you don't feel that the player that you're going to want is there are lots of teams that are willing to trade away potential star players to, bring in a new face of the franchise, right? Because if you're in that position to begin with, if you're a NBA franchise, then clearly whatever things you are doing aren't currently working now. So maybe that is something that a team would be willing to move off of somebody. Now, yeah. who is a player that is worth moving off of a potential top 4 pick this year? I have no idea. The good thing is about the Indiana Pacers, though, is that, Cody, you are in a position where that when Halliburton comes back and he comes back healthy, you're in a position where it's going to be able to work for you, though. You don't have to worry too much about this. Isn't like the Utah Jazz or the Sacramento Kings, where the team for years and years and years has just not been good. Like this nucleus of the Pacers, remember, just a year ago, were in the finals. Sure, maybe a piece or two has left here and there, but this is still the same team that went to the finals a year ago. And obviously, just everybody kept getting hurt, and it was just it was a disaster scenario for the Pacers. But if you want to talk about being in a position that the Pacers are in one of the best positions inside the top 5 to be able to try and repeat going forward once they get everybody back. So that kind of scenario could work for the Pacers if they so choose to do that. So whether you want to stay patient with the young guy and try to move on from there, you can do that. Or if you say that there's just not someone that you really like and you want to bring in somebody that is more of a veteran and can handle things like that, then you're all good to do either.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, there's plenty of options here. And I think one thing to consider, when looking at the Pacers and just if they were to trade that pick, is a lot of questions on if you do trade that pick, are you going to have to disrupt the nucleus of guys you have now, right? Are you going to disrupt some of the players that, have built that chemistry together, right? Who are you going to have to move off of? Whereas there could be a potential there, Derek. I know some people have floated this around. Is there a player that's still on that rookie contract that the Pacers could trade for that would even be available, right? And a team would be willing to part? That would be kind of a more ready to, plug and play now, but they're not a player that you're paying a bunch of money to, like some of the superstars that are getting these max deals. I mean, if you do that, you're going to have to get rid of some of your guys on your roster now. And that's just something I think the Pacers don't want to do. So I think that's something they have to think about there. And there's plenty of options that the Pacers could go after, but obviously it takes two to tango. Do the Pacers feel comfortable enough trading that pick away for a player? Do they feel like they're worth that? And also, does that respective team want to trade away that player? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. But I think right now, Derek, if you're asking me, I think it makes the most sense. If you get a top 4 pick, stay and pick. I think it just makes the most sense with where your current roster is right now. I think the Pacers need to stay put. They need to get their guy and just continue to add. I mean, if you can get a guy that can come in and help you from day one right off the bench and help you in one of those key areas where you feel like you're really struggling, where you feel like you kind of were lacking last year, I think it's going to help you tremendously. I mean, we know the Pacers have some good players coming off the bench that I think can really help them. We know they got TJ McConnell, who is just kind of the engine that runs that second unit. They have potentially some guys who, some young players that could they develop here in, years 2 and 3. I mean, Jarris Walker, a guy that I think had a really strong year when a lot of people said his back's kind of against the wall. It's kind of do or die for Jarris. Could he have a potential role here? And there's a few other players that you could point to as well that were rookies last year that, do they take a step up like a Cam Jones? Isaiah Jackson, like he was a player that I think came in and shocked a lot of people on how good he looked. I mean, there's a few other guys that you could point to as well. Obviously, your backup 5, that's a big question mark. Who do they go with? Do they keep both Micah Potter and Jay Huff on their team, or do they just, re-sign one of these guys? There's a lot of things and decisions that the Pacers are going to have to make here, but I think certainly you can't go wrong with a young guy, an 18, 19-year-old guy that you bring in that is in the immediate going to help you off the bench, but eventually will probably step into one of those starting roles in the next number of years, especially as your roster continues to get a little bit older and some players like Siakam and a few other guys maybe, move on or they were, whatever that looks like. You have a player waiting in the wings here that potentially can step in and take on a larger role. And, he's had a couple of years to prepare and kind of sit under some of these guys. So when his time is called upon, he's a player that you feel confident can step into that role effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never a bad thing to be able to give guys a couple years to be able to get used to the system. And, who knows, by that second or third year, and the guys had plenty of time to get accustomed to, the NBA speed and the level of competition and everything, then who knows? Maybe that was the right decision for the Pacers then, because then you got somebody that can score 20 a game alongside Pascal Siakam and be that offensive piece that sometimes the Pacers are lacking outside of that one scorer that they have. Or, again, if you did decide to go the other route and you want to go for the immediate production, you just also have to know that if you make that move now, that means that the Pacers are confident that they're going to be in a position where they're going to compete right away, which they obviously showed that they can. With a little help from the basketball gods, they are able to get back to that. But yeah, I mean, that's not going to be a long-term thing, though. Right. You're trading the long-term option potential for the short-term option potential, just which one is more valuable to the Pacers. But it feels like they're probably going to allow a young guy to learn and develop underneath of Halliburton and Nembhard and Naismith and some of these other veterans that are currently leading this team.
Yeah, and you can never go wrong with adding a young, talented guy that, like you said, freshman last year, so still very raw and can very much grow into their game, and you think they will, but there's not the pressure right away to come in and start and be all this right away, which I think is good. I think it's good to kind of have a guy that plays a role early, can learn under some of the best in the NBA, and can eventually get to that spot where they can become really effective players in their own right, and they can be hopefully potential superstars in the near future for Indiana. So that's certainly very, very good stuff there. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Let us know your thoughts here on these three different scenarios that the Indiana Pacers could find themselves in. What if the Indiana Pacers do have a top 4 pick? What would you like to see them do? Would you like to see them stay and draft one of the prospects, or would you like to see them trade away the pick and go get an immediate player that's going to come in and potentially, if not start, play big minutes? I think either way, obviously, if the lottery goes well and the Pacers get a top 4 pick, they're going to be getting a good player somewhere on their roster. And that's certainly something that they need. In addition to having, the injuries go their way this year, if you feel like that's something that will really help this team out, and now that they have a legitimate starting center in Zubats, they get Tyrese Halliburton back and potentially add an impact player here in the draft, I think you feel really good about where the Pacers are right now, and who knows what they'll do in free agency. Maybe they'll add another player that can come in and contribute in some capacity, and obviously you hope some of these young guys can continue to come up and develop as well. So we'll have to see on that, guys, but let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. That'll do it for this one, guys. I'm going to be reacting to the draft lottery coming up, so you guys definitely want to hang out for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully Pacers get good luck there and the ball falls their way when it comes to that. But other than that, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. More videos are coming very soon, so be sure to be on the lookout for those. But thanks, guys, so much. And as always, go Pacers.